Throughout this series, I proposed that the last days are a present and ongoing reality. For in Acts chapter 2, it's easy enough to see when the spiritual fulfillment of the day of Pentecost took place and the last days began. But it's another thing entirely to consider if and when the spiritual fulfillment of the Feast of Tabernacles started. We discussed the falling away of the church, represented by the gap between the day of Pentecost and the day of Trumpets. The evidence of this falling away is clarified in the seventh prophecy to the church in Laodicea, where the Lord states that we are neither hot nor cold, but lukewarm. This has been our present condition for some time. For a while now, I have believed that the sounding of the trumpets are the unfolding or coming to pass of each of the prophecies Jesus spoke to the churches. So we have 7 prophecies, 7 trumpets. This perspective is supported by the following. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet, saying, "Write what you see in a book and send it to the 7 churches." What did John hear? A loud voice like a trumpet. What was he told? Write what you see in a book and send it to the 7 churches. Is this the book Jesus takes from the Father in Revelation 5:7? I believe it is. Now, let's go to the following. After this I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." The first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet. No doubt, the voice of Christ is like a trumpet. Does this voice not include words spoken? Of course. So this brings us here. See that you do not refuse him who is speaking. For if they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, much less will we escape if we reject him who warns from heaven. That time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, "Yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens." Dear brother and sister, his voice shakes the earth and the heavens, not because of its volume, but because of its content. It is critical to understand that the sounding of the trumpets are his prophecies coming to pass in their predetermined times. After all, that's the point of prophecy, is it not? To warn us and make us aware of that which he wants us to know. Does he not say to each and every church, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches"? No wonder Jesus said the following. He who rejects me and does not receive my words has that which judges him. The word that I have spoken will judge him in the last day. The word that I have spoken will judge him in the last day, Jesus said. What is this word? It is the 7 trumpets that even now shake the earth and heavens. So if the trumpets are his voice, and his voice are the words he has spoken, then why do we insist that the 7th trumpet is at all literal? It is not. It is an unfolding of his prophetic word, just as the previous 6 trumpets are. This is why I say over and over, resurrection is not an event, but a process. Resurrection is sowing and reaping, therefore a present and ongoing reality. Jesus told Martha, "I am the resurrection." Not an event per se, but the life-giving essence that swallows up death by its very presence. Jesus passed through this process from beginning to end. So when he came to John the Baptist to be baptized and fulfill all righteousness, the heavens were opened to him. The Spirit of God descended like a dove upon him, and the Father's voice declared, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." This is sonship, the first resurrection. For immediately following, Jesus went forth in the power and authority of our Father. And this first resurrection was duplicated in the upper room on the day of Pentecost when Christ came to them. The 7 prophecies to the churches are progressive. In other words, they refer to something developing or happening steadily over time and increasing in extent or severity. This is what Jesus meant by great tribulation and the reason he likened them to birth pains. When prophecy is progressive, it overlaps, and each prophecy that follows builds on the previous one. Now, one more thought before I clarify where I'm going. Note the following from Revelation. John, to the 7 churches that are in Asia, grace to you and peace from him who is, and who was, and who is to come, and from the 7 spirits who are before his throne. Who is, and who was, and who is to come. That's present, past, and future. Progressive prophecies reflect this very thing. For once fulfilled, they become a present reality and part of the past. And because its effects remain, its future as well. Think of it like this. The giving of the prophecy is the seed, while the fulfillment is the fruit. When the fruit remains, it will be seen in the future. And this fruit, it is usually both good and bad, as in the prophecies to the churches. Good for a few, bad for the rest. Good for the humble, bad for the proud. This, of course, explains the need for the separation of the good fruit from the bad. So, what is the main point in all of this? Here it is. We are, even now, passing through the spiritual fulfillment of the Feast of Tabernacles. Allow me to begin my explanation with the numbers. Feast of Tabernacles begins on the first day of the 7th month with the Day of Trumpets. This is 8, a new beginning, one which commences after the falling away of the church. Remember, the grain of wheat, or early New Testament church, was ordained to fall into the ground and die. This corresponds to the night of Pentecost and the gap between the day of Pentecost and the Day of Trumpets. Perhaps that's why we read the following. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. Remember, there are 4 last days, so we must be mindful to consider them all. These are the last days, but then there is the last day of these last days, corresponding to the 7th branch on the lampstand, or half a time. According to Joel and Peter, the great and awesome day of the Lord comes after the sun is turned into darkness and the moon into blood. Literal? I don't think so. The sun is the greater light to rule the day, while the moon is the lesser light to rule the night. The light of both typify the glory of the 2 covenants, old and new. What happens when the church falls away? Like a seed falling into the ground, it descends into darkness, where the light or glory of the covenants are overshadowed by the increase of carnality through the false apostles and prophets rising up among the believers. And why are both covenants necessary? Because the new covenant is the spiritual fulfillment of the old. Just as the moon's light is but a reflection of the sun's light, so the old covenant is the shadow, while the new covenant is the substance. Christ brought both together in himself. Since the moon's light comes from the sun, when the sun is darkened, so too the moon. I certainly can't give an exact date of the falling away of the church because it spans a certain amount of time from the 1st century forward, but it is not necessary to do so. Exact dates and times are unnecessary and lead to foolish conjectures. It is enough to recognize that what follows after the early New Testament church is not what came out of the early New Testament church. Much of what we consider church today is simply a product of the imaginations of the carnal minds of men. How do we know? Because of the pride that saturates its ranks. And yet, this is part and parcel of the 7 prophecies to the churches. Following the falling away of the church comes the Feast of Tabernacles, beginning on the first day of the 7th month, which is the Day of Trumpets. I will stop here, and in the next study, we will consider a theory about the spiritual fulfillment of the Feast of Tabernacles.